If the difference between good crooks and bad thugs is inside information and shrewd preparation, then the mystery man in the high-vis vest is one of the best in the badness business. Trimboli was somehow able to stay ahead of Australian authorities, whose clumsy and cack-handed pursuit of the country's most wanted man raised eyebrows, if not questions. I'm Andrew Rule, this is Life and Crimes. Today we're going to talk about something that my colleague Mark Butler threw up. He said it seems to him, after many years of writing about crime, that inside information is something that links together a lot of big crimes and successful crimes. Crooks that know how to get it and to use it are way ahead of the rest. And to illustrate that, I'm going to tell the story of a jewel heist and then some other stories. The man who got away with the jewellery heist of the decade wanted to be invisible. So, naturally, he wore a bright orange high-visibility vest and one of the standard blue paper masks that were still common after the pandemic. Too easy. It was December the 4th, 2023, and even at 3 a.m, a calm and confident guy in high-vis and a mask didn't set off any alarm bells in the main loading bay of Chadstone Shopping Centre. Chaddy, of course, is the biggest shopping centre in the Southern Hemisphere. The reality of supplying 550 stores and 200,000 square metres of floor space on a site bigger than most dairy farms means that behind the glossy shop fronts there's usually some activity in the basement of the building. So if you wander in there in the middle of the night wearing high-vis and a COVID mask, you're probably not going to set off any bells. The intriguing thing about this particular thief was not that he infiltrated the loading bay on the lower ground level, but that he clearly knew his way around obscure corridors that led him upstairs to the back door of Kennedy. Now, Kennedy is nothing to do with the late American president. Kennedy is the name of a luxury goods boutique that specialises in elite jewellery and Swiss watches. It's a little bit sort of like our local version of Tiffany, maybe. At the front, the Kennedy store is imposing, well-lit and secure. It has all the glittering stone, metal and plate glass that gets people in to buy jewellery and watches by appointment for close to 6 figures. In other words, the price of a good new car. We're talking watches worth between $50,000 and $90,000, many of them. But it was the back door of the store that this thief knew how to navigate. In less than 4 minutes, according to security cameras, our man had got into the store, grabbed 30 high-end watches worth about $2 million retail and bolted. The haul included 8 rare Rolexes and several very valuable Frank Muller timepieces. At the time, this is only 2 years ago, Rolexes were so scarce there was a buyer waiting list. So our high-vis man no doubt could score a premium for them on the black market, either here or overseas or a little bit of both. Now, success breeds imitation. 6 months later, almost to the day, in late May 2024, 4 thieves used the same loading bay to break into the same shop all over again, into Kennedy. So the Chadstone external security had obviously not improved much, but inside the store, new procedures ensured that the most expensive stock was now locked away in heavy safes overnight. The result was that these second wave thieves got away with far less. Interestingly, nobody has been charged with either crime. So in 2 years, the police have not laid a glove on either the first highly successful thief or the bunch of 4. Now, for high-profile entrepreneur James Kennedy, who owns the business, and his glamorous wife Jamie Bell Kennedy, The thefts were a setback in what had been a meteoric rise after Kennedy Jr. revolutionised the business that his father Louis had started in the late 1970s. For the first time in a decade, the Kennedy couple learned that it's not true that any publicity is good publicity. As some observers pointed out, the first Chadstone heist followed Jamie Bell's eye-catching display of wealth on social media, modelling designer clothes and accessories. One gossip columnist noted, "Many have said former waitress Jamie Bell's decision to flash her cash may have prompted the robbery," unquote. An insider said of the same young woman, "She's had a bit of a scare. It's made her think twice about what she posts." So this is, of course, the flip side of social media, that it can attract the wrong sort of attention. Even the brashest influencers can learn from a bruising experience like that, something that cunning crooks and prudent millionaires know very well. And that is this. Inside information is as crucial to career criminals as it is to stock market sharks and professional punters, as in horse punters. Police investigating the first Kennedy raid had little doubt that someone with inside help was responsible. Whether they were using first-hand knowledge or were well briefed by a secret source, the thief was able to reach Kennedy's back door fast and knew exactly how to get through it and which watches to grab. If the difference between good crooks and bad thugs is inside information and shrewd preparation, then the mystery man in the high-vis vest is one of the best in the badness business. That his identity is still unknown more than 2 years later indicates the skill and discipline of the sharp minds on the dark side. There's no evidence that the Kennedy watch thief is connected with what we crime reporters have dubbed the gym gang. When we say the gym gang, we mean the gymnasium gang, a group of long-time martial artists and boxers known to have pulled a series of heists in the quarter century after they debuted with a big Victorian Railways payroll stick-up from a train at Ascot Vale back in 1982. They've been with us a while, these guys. In that one and each of their other heists over about 24 years, the gang members were as patient and well prepared as commandos on a mission, often posing as harmless workers by using clothes, props and disguises. Above all, this gang prized inside information, the difference between cool professionals and those who spend their lives in jail. The Kennedy raids happened some years after the gym gang's string of elite jobs, which were executed over 24 years. But a thought that might niggle detectives wondering about good crooks with local knowledge of Chadstone is this. One of the gym gang kingpins has always lived in the area, which makes him favourite for 2 unsolved robberies at the shopping centre in one hectic period nearly 30 years earlier. 30 years before this Kennedy watch theft, there were 2 robberies at Chadstone. In February 1994, there was an armoured van robbery of $107,000, plus the security guard's pistols. It was followed just 3 months later by an $80,000 robbery in which 3 people were coolly shot in the legs for daring to disobey orders not to resist or not to follow the robber. Investigators back then soon wondered if one or both of the 1994 Chadstone robberies were in fact practice runs to pull together cash and guns ready for a really big heist, the audacious $2.3 million fake road crew robbery of an armour guard cash van near the freeway entrance at the Cremorne end of Richmond just weeks after the second Chadstone robbery. So what we've got here is 2 smaller robberies with guns and money at Chadstone Shopping Centre, followed within weeks by this great big one, which we've often talked about on the podcast. The gym gang were, and are, hardened armed robbers capable of extreme violence, but investigators believe they were also happy to use sleight of hand and specialised in cultivating insiders to set up large-scale heists. One example of that was at Perth Airport in 2005 when $100,000 cash was inexplicably dropped from an airport trolley somewhere between the cargo shed and an aeroplane. And at Sunshine Plaza in Melbourne's West in 2006, more than $1 million was smoothly lifted from an armoured van when a guard just happened to leave the vehicle unguarded long enough for a thief dressed in armour guard uniform to grab the loot. In the notorious 1994 fake road gang heist at Richmond that we just mentioned, an armoured van was opened by a robber miraculously supplied with the right key, a plot device worthy of Hollywood. It's sort of Ocean's 11 stuff. Then there was the $500,000 robbery at Myers City Store in 1993. Every one of these crimes demanded nerve and timing, but each depended totally on inside information, just like the biggest heists and hits in Australian crime history. A big reference point for the power of inside information is the Great Bookie robbery at the Victorian Club in Melbourne in 1976. As most listeners will know, the very well-rehearsed robbery crew had pulled together several layers of inside knowledge. One was that the first bookmakers' settling day after 3 Easter race meetings would be a bumper amount of cash, far more than at any other settling up that year. Second was the fact there was a forgotten and unused side door to the settling room, linking it to an unused stair landing in the building next door. A marvellous piece of inside knowledge. This door that was painted over was still there and could be accessed if you knew where to do it. Third was that a bent senior policeman, the late Eric Janetsky, it is said, could ensure that crime squad detectives who usually turned up for settling day, acting as unofficial armed security for the bookies, were diverted at the last minute. They were sent on a wild goose chase down to Frankston or somewhere, leaving big bags of cash delivered by armoured car, virtually unguarded once it was taken into the settling room in the Victorian Club. So all these 3 factors were at play. They were all inside information. And that is what made the bookie robbery the perfect crime. But it didn't protect the robbers from underworld reprisals or from each other. When the ringleader Ray Chuck, also known as Raymond Patrick Bennett, appeared in Melbourne Magistrates Court on minor charges in 1979, his enemies knew he would be escorted upstairs to a particular courtroom, and they also knew that if he went to jail, they wouldn't be able to get him. He'd be quite secure in jail. But they knew their last chance was when he appeared at Melbourne Magistrates Court for the foreseeable future. And so they knew he'd be escorted upstairs, and so that's where his bearded assassin waited, disguised as a lawyer. After shooting Chuck, the hitman escaped down a labyrinth of back stairs to a hidden car park where someone had earlier loosened and bent a sheet of corrugated iron to allow him to slip into the RMIT car park next door and escape by car to the airport so he could fly to Perth with his brother. In other words, the robber who had exploited inside information to stage the bookie robbery was in turn executed by enemies with inside information. Ray Chuck lived by the sword and died by the sword. The shooter, although widely suspected, was never charged over the brazen courtroom hit. His name was Brian Kane, and exactly 3 years later, perhaps not a coincidence, he was ambushed by 2 masked men in the Quarry Hotel in Brunswick in 1982. The hit team obviously had good information. When drug baron Tony Mockbell was flying high in the late 90s, he cultivated people who could provide information, from pizza deliverers to friendly police and, of course, certain lawyers. No names, no pack drill, but Nicola Gobbo comes to mind. It was a lawyer who warned him in 2006 he would soon be charged with murder, a tip that let him stage his audacious escape on a yacht to hide in Greece. I don't believe it was actually Nicola Gobbo that tipped him off, it was another lawyer. Mokbel might have remained a free-spending fugitive for years if one of his gang's insiders, a man known as the Musician, had not switched sides and handed sceptical detectives a USB stick full of secret telephone numbers and bank details revealing Mokbel's Athens hideaway. So, the drug baron who escaped using inside information was caught the same way. The Mokbel equivalent of a previous generation, Robert Aussie Bob Trimboli, was also tipped off by a corrupt cop to flee the country in early 1981 to avoid being forced to testify at a looming royal commission. He went to Ireland via the United States, and although he was briefly jailed in Ireland later after living there peacefully under a false name, Trimboli was somehow able to stay ahead of Australian authorities whose clumsy and cack-handed pursuit of the country's most wanted man raised eyebrows, if not questions. It turned out that illness did what the world's police could not. The man who'd got the mail from bent police, customs officers and jockeys for years could stay ahead of the posse, but he could not escape from a much deadlier enemy, cancer. When Trimboli died in Spain in 1987 with his long-term lover Anne-Marie Presland at his bedside, legendary News Corp correspondent Bruce Wilson wrote words to the effect of, "If Robert Trimboli was our most wanted man, the second most wanted can sleep very soundly indeed." Wilson might also have made a crack about tracking elephants through snow, something that upset the federal police, as I recall. But history is on Bruce Wilson's side, of course. The truth is, there's nothing quite as useful to a crook as inside information. Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is Jonty Burton. For my columns, features and more, go to heraldsun.com.au/Andrew Rule, one word. For advertising inquiries, go to newspodcastssold@news.com.au. That is all one word, newspodcastssold. And if you want further information about this episode, links are in the description.